The Resident Evil series has always lived in the shadow of real-world fears, pandemics, weapons of mass destruction, and the collision between government secrecy and corporate power. Yet, one of the most overlooked elements of Resident Evil canon is that it does not exist in a purely fictional world. The Japanese version of Leon S. Kennedy's file in Resident Evil 6 explicitly situates him within the post-September 11th counter-terror climate, confirming that 9/11 happened in the Resident Evil timeline. This one detail does far more than tether the series to our history. It reshapes how we understand the political, military, and cultural landscape in which the characters operate, and how the United States transforms from the war on terror to the war on bioterrorism. The English version of Leon S. Kennedy's file sanitizes the details, opting for vague descriptions of counterterrorism experience. But the Japanese version is blunt. It states Leon's early 2000s career was shaped by the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. It frames his development within real-world counter-terror operations. It positions him as part of the national security restructuring triggered by those events. In 2001, the US in the Resident Evil universe had already suffered a national trauma, the destruction of Raccoon City in 1998. To the public, Raccoon City was officially attributed to a nuclear meltdown, even though the truth, a cover-up of the T-virus outbreak, was whispered in government halls and media conspiracy circles. While we as the audience know that the US military was in contact with Birkin in regards to the G-virus, the American public at this current time are still unaware of the fact that the US military had a hand in the fall of Raccoon City. America had endured its own unspeakable event before the real-world 9/11. So when 9/11 happened in this world, it struck a population that was already paranoid, confused, and scarred by the events of Raccoon City, aware that something was wrong with the Raccoon narrative, and was primed to expect hidden threats and catastrophic surprises. The combination of Raccoon City's unresolved trauma and 9/11's public horror pushed the US into its most paranoid era since the Cold War. Here's where things get even more fascinating. The Raccoon City trials, which prosecuted former Umbrella executives as well as the founder of the Umbrella Corporation, Oswald E. Spencer, began in 1998, almost immediately after the events of Raccoon City. The Raccoon City trials ended in early 2003, which resulted in the complete disintegration of the Umbrella Corporation. The Raccoon City trials overlaps directly with the 9/11 attacks. Imagine the public consciousness in this universe. Televised courtroom hearings exposing Umbrella's corruption, whispers from insiders leaking information online in the early days of the internet, and then, while this is happening, 9/11 occurs. For a public already on the edge, the timing would have been surreal. It would feel like one nightmare layered on top of another. This overlap likely supercharged national paranoia. The fictional and real-world crises merged into one broad cultural anxiety. The Raccoon trials formally ended in early 2003, likely around the same time the United States launched its invasion of Iraq in March of 2003, meaning that as America wrapped up its supposed hunt for WMDs, it was also concluding its fictional legal battle over widespread bio-WMD conduct. Before the Terra Grigia panic in 2004, the world's first major exposure to bioterrorism, the US government was already aware that former Umbrella scientists and executives were selling viral agents on the black market, especially once it became clear that the Umbrella Corporation was going to lose the Raccoon trials. In the Resident Evil universe, government officials would still be reeling from the revelations of Umbrella's crimes, while pivoting immediately into the global war on terror. In 2003, the American mindset was already shaped by fear of weapons of mass destruction, deep suspicion towards corporations and government agencies, and a wave of heightened nationalism. In this climate, those anxieties would only intensify. It becomes painfully easy to see how the United States in Resident Evil would shift rapidly from fearing terrorism to fearing bioterrorism. In our world, following 9/11, America built the DHS and the TSA. They also expanded the CIA's operations, counterterrorism doctrines became more aggressive, as well as building vast intelligence networks. But in Resident Evil, these same structural changes had to confront a different nightmare. The United States had already seen a city wiped off the map by a viral outbreak. Thus, post-9/11 policy merges with post-Raccoon paranoia. The war on terror morphs into a dual war front. This would be standard terrorism and bioterrorism. By the late 2000s, the United States shifts its priorities.
I want you all to know that America today is on bended knee in prayer for the people whose lives were lost here, for the workers who work here, for the families who mourn. This nation stands with the good people of New York City and New Jersey and Connecticut as we mourn the loss of thousands of our citizens. I can hear you. I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Counter-terror divisions begin incorporating biodefense specialists. Intelligence agencies prepare for viral attacks alongside conventional ones. Training programs are created to counter these threats. Bioterror prevention becomes inseparable from national security doctrine. This leads directly into the formation of organizations like the BSAA internationally, and eventually the DSO domestically. The Japanese version of Leon's file makes it clear that his expertise stems directly from this chaotic era. Leon's trajectory is shaped by Raccoon City's aftermath, the expansion of US counter-terror operations after 9/11, government awareness of bioweapons proliferation, as well as secret assignments tying him to classified biodefense missions. By grounding Leon in this environment, Capcom clarifies why he becomes one of the world's most elite anti-bioterror operatives. Leon isn't superhuman, he's just a product of a United States that believes, never again, not to a virus, not to a terror cell, not to a corporation. At the time, American audiences are understandably sensitive to direct references to 9/11 in entertainment. The Japanese version doesn't carry those cultural or political constraints. The localization team likely removed the reference to avoid controversy or claims of insensitivity, but in terms of raw canon, Japanese sources remain the foundation. Thus, 9/11 is canon to Resident Evil, even if it is not mentioned in any English translations. Understanding that 9/11 occurred in Resident Evil's timeline reframes the entire early 2000s era of the franchise. The United States experiences the trauma of Raccoon City, the shock of 9/11, the paranoia of the Raccoon trials, the political upheaval of the Iraq War, and the birth of bioterrorism, all within a 5-year window. This is the crucible that forged not just the DSO and the BSAA, but the entire atmosphere of Resident Evil's modern era. The war on terror becomes the war on bioterrorism because in this universe, terrorism alone isn't the only threat. Viruses are the new WMDs. And Leon becomes the man standing on the front line of a world that has already seen far too many catastrophes, both real and biological. Once we acknowledge that 9/11 occurred in the Resident Evil timeline, something disturbing becomes clear. It is no longer the definitive national trauma of the 21st century. In our real world, 9/11 is the singular hinge point of modern American history. But in the Resident Evil universe, it is quickly overshadowed, even dwarfed, by a series of bioterror catastrophes that escalate far beyond anything seen on September 11th, 2001. The first major blow to 9/11's historical primacy comes in 2005 with the Harvardville airport incident. A literal airliner crashes into a passenger terminal not due to hijackers, but because someone infected with the T-virus was already on board the flight. What begins as a seemingly traditional airline disaster transforms into a full-scale urban bioterror emergency. The idea that an airport, the very symbol of post-9/11 security, could be infiltrated by infected individuals exposes a new, more terrifying reality. In this world, terrorism doesn't just involve box cutters and coordinated hijackings. It involves viruses, undead civilians, mutation events, and the potential for exponential spread. Harvardville becomes a cultural scar far deeper than 9/11 because it confirms the unimaginable. Terrorists no longer need weapons, they just need carriers. The second and even more devastating event is the Tall Oaks outbreak in 2013, witnessed in Resident Evil 6. This is not a localized incident. Tall Oaks is annihilated. A full American city is effectively wiped off the map. Its population turned into the infected within hours. The scale of the Tall Oaks catastrophe is comparable not to 9/11, but to the destruction of Raccoon City. The Tall Oaks incident actually results in the death of the US President Adam Benford. Buildings collapse, evacuations fail, and the US government faces the horrifying truth that a second American city has fallen. This time, not to corporate negligence, but to intentional biological terrorism. If Raccoon City is America's Hiroshima, then Tall Oaks is its Nagasaki. As a result, 9/11 becomes eclipsed not only by body count, but by the existential terror of a raccoon repeat. But the event that finally buries 9/11 as a cultural turning point is the New York bioterror attack in Resident Evil Vendetta. This bioattack occurs in 2014. It is the equivalent of 9/11 happening again in New York, but worse. Glenn Aries unleashes the A virus on New York, a strain capable of turning people into highly functioning zombies while still remaining subject to external control. Streets turn into chaos. The infection spreads through major avenues and corporate high-rises. Chris Redfield, Leon S. Kennedy, and the BSAA struggled to contain an outbreak in one of the most densely populated cities on Earth. In our world, even the threat of an attack in New York is historically defining. In Resident Evil's world, it actually happens, and not as a plane hijacking or a mass shooting, but as a modern biological weapon unleashed in broad daylight. The symbolism is staggering. The city that stands as the global icon of resilience after 9/11 becomes the stage for a viral nightmare on a scale physically impossible for human hijackers. From skyscrapers to subways, New York becomes a theater of biological warfare. When viewed chronologically, the effect these events have on 9/11's historical importance is dramatic. By the time of Resident Evil Vendetta, 9/11 is no longer the defining symbol of modern terrorism. It is the prelude, a dark chapter in a nation's memory, but ultimately a footnote to a far deadlier era defined not by hijackers, but by viral WMDs. In the Resident Evil universe, the question shifts from how do we stop another 9/11 to how do we stop the next viral genocide. It is this transformation, the replacement of traditional terrorism with bioengineered terror, that permanently relegates 9/11 from a world-shaping tragedy to a historical stepping stone on the way to far worse catastrophes.